Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. Myself and John Strand are here to talk about using Bro in the enterprise. So they're actually based on, John, several questions that we got from the audience on our recent webcast, which I think was great. Endgame sponsored our webcast, and we talked about doing network-based hunting and using Bro, and this was the first part in this webcast series. And then we talked about some endpoint hunting stuff that Endgame does. And there were a lot of great questions, John. Too many to answer in the hour span time that we had. And I thought we'd just distill down some of these questions. There were some common themes in here that I wanted to address. First, John, I just want to get your thoughts about using Bro in the enterprise and some of the things that we've seen that actually surprised us both.
Well, I think the Bro is probably one of the best foundations you can have as far as network intelligence. Doesn't have a pretty GUI, doesn't give you out all kinds of little reports, but it basically kicks out all the data in really easy to ingest, really easy to parse, really easy to work through format. So you can ask the proper questions and very quickly get to some answers. We saw a lot of people on the webcast talking about taking terabytes of data throughout the course of a day and dropping it down to less than 100 meg of Bro logs and being able to query that and really finding some fantastic things. And our first webcast in the series was basically installing, making sure the logs are there, importing PCAP data and doing some analysis, but Bro's free. And to have a tool that allows you to go digging a lot deeper in your packets as far as what's happening with NetFlow, what's happening with DNS packets, what's happening with HTTP, HTTPS certificates and files is just, it's just awesome. And I think that a lot of these tools are very slow to be adopted because they don't have the fancy pants GUI associated with them. But that's what we're trying to accelerate with Bro. In this particular webcast, we're trying to get people to start using it a lot more. And it also, selfishly, it is the bedrock foundation for what our product does for doing analysis on Bro logs and doing some really cool hunt teaming analytics.
So one of the questions, and it relates to our earlier conversation on this show about the movement to the cloud and virtualization. So if you have virtualization locally on premise and or you have systems in the cloud, how do you then capture packets and get them to Bro in first a virtualized environment and then in a cloud environment?
Well, the really cool thing is about how to, anytime that we do a webcast like this is, we don't have all the answers. As much as we've been doing this for a long time, a lot of people, start asking us questions that start becoming kind of at the fringe of what we can actually pull from our fingertips in the middle of a webcast. And that's going to happen naturally. But the cool thing was in the middle of this webcast, we had people that were basically posting blog articles. Like Router Reflector had a great article back in 2014 about how to do port mirroring on VMware vSwitch. And DVS switch. And that's awesome, right? And a lot of these things can be answered by simple Google query, but to actually have people that are in the community that are saying, this is the article right here that helped me, cutting through the chase as far as like what it is that you can do. But yeah, you can do that. On the show notes, we have the instructions for Router Reflector. And Amazon, they actually have a really, really nice article about how to do port mirroring in AWS IaaS to set it up so you can actually configure it within Amazon itself. And that just basically means that you can do that very easily in these different things as part of your virtual private cloud infrastructure.
That's just awesome. That's just awesome. Yeah, that's a very common question that we didn't really talk about too much in the webcast, but it was talked about heavily in the questions.
We've got to have a webcast dedicated to actually doing Bro analysis in the cloud. We have to.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of products, by the way. If you actually go to the Amazon Marketplace, let me actually bring that up. Marketplace security. There are tons of security vendors, actually, that you can get firewalls and all kinds of different things directly in the Amazon Marketplace. Hold on, I know Palo Alto is in the marketplace, Sophos is in the marketplace, Cisco and Checkpoint are, of course, Alert Logic, F5. So there's tons of security products that are out there. And the cool thing about the Amazon Marketplace for these commercial products is you just simply click it, and then it automatically loads it up into your AWS cloud infrastructure. And then you can start setting it up just like you would within your environment, but it's actually easier and it's completely virtualized. And a lot of the ways, Paul, whenever you and I first started researching it, it was interesting how cost effective a lot of these cloud-based appliances are. So yeah, you can do it with these commercial products, but yeah, you can also do it creating your own AMI with Bro and get that type of data as well.
And what's interesting is we talk about the movement to the cloud, a lot of people are asking, well, like in a physical environment, what do I use to collect the packets? But then it's so much easier and cheaper to do that in the cloud. I don't need to purchase a physical device. However, I think we're always going to have something that's collecting packets on our local network as people browse the internet and such. Who knows? Maybe we won't someday. But they got into the discussion of, well, what do you buy on your network and then put on your network to do a span port? Now, obviously, if you have Cisco switches or any big name vendor switches, there's port mirroring built in. Yep. However, that could have some design limitations. So we started talking about on the really low end, there's dual com. That's more for the very small office or your personal research. You can use a dual com tap, essentially. They're like, I think the low one's like $180, and you get, you can probably 2 and change, you can get a gigabit one, or 300, you get a gigabit one.
Yeah, they're really cost effective.
And then someone mentioned net optics as being in the mix as well. And then, of course, our favorite is we see in the enterprise a lot is Gigamon.
Yeah, well, Gigamon is just massive. I think that we were kind of surprised how many of our customers actually are running Gigamon in their infrastructure, and it has beautiful capability of getting PCAPs. And any type of device that you purchase, a switch or a router or anything like that, that's worth its salt, is going to have that capability to be able to pull full PCAP data as well. So, it's going to be there, right? It's absolutely going to be there if it is in fact a good product. And if you look at it and you're like, well, this Linksys switch doesn't have this capability, then you probably shouldn't be running like home level routing equipment in your infrastructure.
Yeah. Another interesting question that we didn't get to, which SANS classes are talking about Bro?
See, I thought Phil Hagen's class, SANS Network Forensics, I know that Mike Poor and Judy Novak's class does that. Okay. 503 actually has a day dedicated to Bro and a full module dedicated to it. And I think that 572 is the other class by Phil Hagen that has it. And if you get a chance, take it from Phil Hagen or George Bakos. Those guys are just awesome rock stars. But yeah, those would be the two big ones. I would start with 503 because that's going to give you a firm understanding as far as what the TCP/IP header looks like. It's going to give you a firm understanding of NetFlow, get you exposed to Snort, and get you exposed to Bro as well.
There were some interesting questions about placement. We talked about placing it before the traffic goes out to the internet. We also talked about placing it before the proxy traffic. We didn't really talk about placement in terms of DNS. And then we got this whole discussion about DNS and blacklisting and things like that. So I want to spend a little more time on that.
Well, a couple of quick things. One, if you have systems that are making direct DNS calls out to the internet, that's something that you want to investigate. Ideally, your workstation should be doing DNS calls, usually to a domain controller, which then forwards it out to kind of like your split DNS architecture, split DNS architecture, forwarding it out through the internal recursive DNS server, does external recursion for internal systems. And that's great. But you can actually pull down those DNS logs and you can do analysis with them offline. But if you're running Bro, it's basically looking for everything else. It's basically going to be looking for any of the DNS calls that are going directly outside of that infrastructure, depending on how you actually have it placed. But no, that's a good question. And honestly, you'll still be pulling down that DNS because you're going to be seeing the recursive lookups from the domain controller going outbound, but you won't necessarily have the fidelity all the way back down to the workstation itself that made that query in all the situations. So that one becomes a little bit more dicey. Not impossible, but a little bit more dicey.
I mean, you could almost, it depends on your environment, and you could probably do this with multiple sensors, depending on the size of your environment. But if you port mirror the ports before your proxy firewall to catch web traffic, and you port mirror the ports that are going to your internal DNS servers, you would see all of that traffic before it basically got anonymized and was hiding the client's IP address. So you can do some fancy things with port mirroring. I know there are performance impacts on the switch. There may be different physical locations, multiple. There's a lot of complexity in there depending on your environment. However, those are the kind of things that you're after, I think, when you're deploying Bro. And to speak to placement beyond what we talked about on the webcast, that you should be thinking about when you deploy Bro sensors.
And that's something that's part of the reason why we actually open sourced Rita, right? If you're looking at Bro, you don't have to make a decision. Should I do it here? Should I do it over there? It's going to be $10,000 if I try to do both. It's free. So you can literally do exactly what you said. You can have a Bro placement for the egress traffic leaving your environment for everything but DNS, and maybe put it on another location for a DNS server for your internal workstation. So it's free. It works very, very easy to install and stand it up in a number of different locations. So why not take advantage of that, right?
Absolutely. We then questions kind of delved into DNS blacklisting, and I think it was kind of interesting in the different levels of blacklisting that you can do. I'm not sure how it was related to Bro, but you can blacklist based on DNS name. Can you blacklist on user agent? Are there user agent blacklists out there?
Yeah, you can actually. There are user agent blacklists, and you can even do user agent whitelisting, especially with a lot of the different web proxy products that are out there.
Gotcha.
You can actually restrict it down at that particular point as well.
And then there's URL as well. Those are the three areas where you can.
Yep. You can blacklist fairly easily, and you can use products and services like URL void, IP void, and there's threat intelligence feeds that you can actually plug into as well.
And I feel like that we're talking about an open source product here in the enterprise. I feel like IP, domain, user agent, and URL blacklisting there's open source solutions to do all of that. Even open source threat intelligence feeds that'll give you the data on what to block. And you can accomplish that fairly easily in your environment with just open source stuff.
Well, and that gets into an interesting conversation. Should organizations do the open source stuff or should they do the commercial stuff? And I think probably the best approach, and I want to get your opinion on this because this is important. It ties into the Bro conversation and everything else. Do the open source stuff first. Get that implemented, get that working, and then look at a commercial product. And the reason why I think that that's a good approach is that you'll understand the fundamental problems and the technology and the approaches for trying to deal with these products that are open source before you look at a commercial tool. So you'll be able to make a more informed decision, and you know what you're paying for. You're not paying for everything that really expensive commercial product does. You're paying for what that commercial product does that the open source free tool does not do for you.
Correct. Yeah, no, I think it's a good baseline to have, and a good evaluation point too. As you look at the commercial solutions, you're like, well, my open source stuff does more than that, or just does enough of that I'm happy with it, or maybe they're on par feature wise, or maybe the commercial tool just has features where you're like, I don't really care about those. No, I think you're right, John. I think you're right.
Cool. And we Bro, we've got a lot more to do with Bro. I think that I might try to squirrel in some Bro in with threat intelligence feeds in the next webcast. I do love it, by the way, if you guys didn't pick it up. Paul is doing the webcast yesterday or a couple of days ago, and he's like, yep, and we got a threat intelligence webcast coming up on the 15th, and John's going to be on that one. I'm like, oh. So surprise, but that'll be interesting because a lot of people know my intense hatred for a lot of threat intelligence feeds and the way that they're actually implemented, and I think that that's going to be an interesting webcast.
Absolutely. So how tall do you need to be to ride the Bro ride? Right.
5 minutes, dude. 5 minutes. You download Security Onion. You start Security Onion. You run Bro where you read in a PCAP file and it kicks out the log files, and you use Bro-cut to pull the logs and stuff you want. 5 minutes. After you have Security Onion installed, it's done. It's just that easy.
Let's say I'm really high on the maturity curve and I don't have Bro, or the opposite situation. I have no other security controls and I want to use Bro. I don't think that there's a barrier to entry for Bro. I think everyone can take advantage of it because it's just going to give you good information about your network, security related or not, right?
Well, I agree with that. I do think that you have to have some base level skill of understanding what a packet, a port is, what a connection actually is, HTTP, HTTPS, what an X509 certificate is. I think you have to understand the concept of what those logs contain. You have to understand Bro-cut to actually pull the data, and you would have to know grep to actually pull out certain strings. But I think after that, I think you should be able to piece things together on your own. There's so much out there with the community for Bro of people that are willing to help you get started and working with Bro that there's really no excuse not to try and start with it.
Here's a great question that you could take into a lot of talking about wonderful things about Bro. What's the difference between Bro and TShark?
TShark is like a command line invocation of Wireshark, and you can do a lot of cool things with Wireshark without question. So I would basically say they're looking at the same thing, but it's like a prism. They're cutting the light in different ways. Wireshark, it's just like, well, I could do anything with Bro that I can do with TCP dump. Yeah.
Theoretically, yes.
Theoretically, you could also do it in C, and you could write your own protocol parsers. But I think that that's the power, is Bro gives you that information that is useful for actual security analytics directly off the bat, and you can dig into it in any type of network traffic analytics. So I would basically leave it with this. If you're good with TShark and you love TShark, use TShark. If you're looking for something that's really easy to get in and actually looking at NetFlow and connections for DNS and connection logs, then Bro is probably going to be the tool that you want to look into. And I don't think, Paul, we ever try to tell people one tool is better than another tool. It's just they're different tools, and you define the best one for you. It gets into that VI versus Emacs versus Nano debate.
You mentioned Security Onion before, John, and will Security Onion handle VLAN tags without an issue? And what if, so you want to mirror a trunk port, and then my follow-on question is, how does that play into Bro?
Never done that as far as like pulling it off of a trunk port. I have never had that problem for trying to look into it. I always make it run on specific VLANs to try to look at that data directly. However, if you look at VLAN traffic and Security Onion solutions, they have a full wiki that actually tells you exactly how to do it. And oh my God, Paul, do you know who wrote the wiki article on VLAN traffic? Like all of the articles in the Security Onion wiki?
Joff?
No, Doug Burks. So Doug Burks is such a rock star. So with this, you have the capability with a number of different tools that can actually handle VLAN trunking.
Right.
So for example, with Snort, you can actually put in the specific VLAN that you're interested in. You can use Arcata.
Can you do that in Bro? Does Bro? So
I don't actually see that, but the question was about Security Onion.
And the Security Onion supports it, because VLAN tagging is just built into the Linux networking stack.
Yep. So you should be able to pull that.
I don't know if you can tell Bro, like, look at, here's a trunk port, basically a mirror of a trunk port. Look at these VLANs, but not these VLANs. I don't know if you can do that with Bro. I'm sure there's someone yelling at their podcast right now.
Oh, I know, with the Bro heads that are out there. It's just not something that I've ever really had to do. Yeah. Associated with that. But no, I would assume that you would be able to pull that back. Once you're on the trunk port, you're seeing all the packets that are going through at that point. So it should be able to parse it. But that also gets into kind of a fundamental difference, right? Whenever we're talking about using Bro, we're not actually talking about putting it on the inside of the network and trying to track absolutely everything, but rather we're trying to look at it. Give me 5 minutes. We're trying to look at it what's leaving the environment, the egress traffic that's leaving your environment, to see where your internal hosts are going outbound. Now, you can absolutely install it on the inside of the network without question, but that's predominantly what we're talking about. It's predominantly what we actually do with it as well in our consulting engagements.
What is Bro's advantage over Splunk?
They're two completely different things.
I guess it's an opportunity to talk about some of the issues with logging.
I think that we attacked logging in SIMs very heavily.
Yeah, I think we did too.
At the webcast yesterday. So I guess what I would say is, if you're looking at Bro, Bro gives you a language and a syntax and a capability of asking questions from your network traffic. It's kind of like a common language associated with that. If you're looking at Splunk, it's a SIM. It's basically looking at event logs from a wide variety of different products: Windows systems, Linux systems, web applications, Oracle databases, all the way up to Active Directory. So they're two completely different security technologies.
So does Bro essentially to replace your NetFlow collectors?
You know what? I would absolutely say that you could do that. Now, a lot of your vendors out there, like you can get JFlow, you can get NetFlow off a bunch of different devices. You can pull it down. But the problem is a lot of the different vendors that are out there, they actually log NetFlow data differently. They haven't come up with a consistent standard. This goes back to
like Cisco's NetFlow is completely unique. When I worked with it, it was completely unique.
And I think it's even completely unique from a number of different products perspective. It's not consistently unified across their entire product base. So that's one of the reasons also that we like Bro, is that it's fast and it gives you very consistent timestamps in the way that actually logs on the data and the communications leaving. So yes, you absolutely could use Bro for NetFlow. In fact, I would say that should be one of the primary tools that you use for NetFlow.
Now, it's interesting. Someone was asking about integration with firewalls and the like. And during the webcast, and unfortunately I haven't researched it since then, I didn't see where pfSense, for example, had a package for Bro. They have a package for Suricata and Snort, I believe. But not for Bro. So that's kind of, if that's
that
not the case, the Bro folks will correct me if I'm wrong, or just couldn't. I suck at Google searching or something. But yeah. I was surprised that wasn't there. Maybe it is. Maybe it's a private repository and someone's put it on, or maybe it hasn't been done yet. Maybe there's performance impacts. I don't see. It depends on what your pfSense firewall hardware is. Certainly, the one that I've built for my house could handle Bro. So yeah, I think that would be a good thing. But now Bro is just a command line thing, John. Right? I mean, there's no like. I remember when I was doing net flow analysis, I would get this open source tool that would basically sniff data. It was IP audit, and then it was like a Perl interface, and it gave me a web interface and let me sort some of the data. And I was actually using that to do what we're deeming today as threat hunting.
Yep.
Basically look for stuff that's already compromised. But with Bro, it's just command line. Like there's no, like do people make, is there a front end that I can use to analyze all of that data with that's free and open source as well?
And that's what we're trying to do with Rita, right? We're trying to create better analytics engine for Bro logs. Now, there's a whole bunch of different ways you can look at Bro logs and visualize them. We're specifically looking at it from a beaconing malware C2 perspective. But no, there is no wonderful unified front end that actually pulls down everything that you need. It's basically very specialized tools. And I think that's part of the reason why Bro hasn't quite, I mean, it's huge now, but it's taken forever. It's just been a really slow burn for years now.
It was interesting. I was analyzing some of the malware that was attacking the Swift network earlier this year. And I was reading about, not analyzing the actual malware, but I read in someone's analysis that some of the malware that was used made a connection to an IP address over HTTP every hour. And I was like, wow, that's like so easy to detect now. Given our company and the conversations we've been having.
Well, and yeah, but it also, I talked about this on the webcast. We're basically trying to do this specifically because we're trying to educate our potential customer base in the future. And if people get free tools and they don't need our product and they can do all the stuff on their own, that's great. More power to them. And I think it actually betters the entire security community. But we need to start seeing people moving more into trying to get tools that give them better analytical data to make better decisions rather than trying to replace humans. And also, that kind of leads me into a shout out for Endgame. He was awesome yesterday.
Yeah,
he did
Mark
a fantastic
is awesome.
job.
Yeah.
We're always really worried. I'm more worried than you are anytime we get a vendor on the show because we're afraid it's going to turn into a total sales pitch. But he was an absolute rock star and has a real solid technical background, which I think is.
No, you still there, John?
I am.
Okay, good.
Can you hear me?
Well, that was all I had, really. I didn't have, unless you had more comments on using Bro in the enterprise.
No, I think I just keep on looking for our webcasts and stuff that are coming up. And Paul, we should probably tweet out from your Twitter and mine how people can register for our webcast. I think that would probably be a good idea for everybody.
Let me make sure this still works.
It does. It's the MailChimp.
Yeah. Okay. So securityweekly.com/insider allows you to subscribe to our mailing list, which they always get notification of webcasts first.
Is that the one that's actually at MailChimp, or is that a different one?
That's the MailChimp one. Yep.
Okay, it is.
Yeah,
okay.
That'll
very,
let you
very
register for our MailChimp one. Correct.
All right. Very cool. So tweet that out real quick so I can tweet it too.
Okay. I will do that.
Get that out.
And then securityweekly.com/survey to fill out our 2016-2017 survey that will help us help you. So that concludes this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. Thank you, John, and thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.